You're listening to MMA Think Tank with Jay and Mike.
Welcome to the MMA Think Tank. I am your host, Jay. Along with me, as always, is my co-host, Mike. How have you been, man?
I've been pretty good. You know, we've had some pretty good fight cards the last couple of weeks, and we've got a decent one coming up this Saturday at UFC 195. So are you excited about that, Jay, and how have you been?
Yeah, I'm excited. You know, had a good Christmas. So you had a good Christmas, Mike?
I did. My wife was pretty awesome. She put together a shadow box of Randy Couture, had a signed glove and signed picture that I already had. She printed out a picture of me and him together, slapped it together, was pretty awesome. And folks out there, Jay got me, if you have not seen it, on the Facebook site, got me a really cool Conor McGregor shirt with him knocking out Jose Aldo. It's pretty cool. Jay, why don't you go and talk about that?
Well, it's just a little shirt I had put together for you. It's just Conor McGregor standing over Aldo, basically saying what he said after the fight about the precision and speed and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's timing beats speed and precision beats power, something
That's
of that
right.
effect. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. But, Mike, you know what? We had a pretty decent card in UFC on Fox. It was UFC on Fox 17 just about a week or so ago. And, you know what? It was pretty good up until the main fight of the night, I guess.
Yeah.
Dos Anjos versus Cerrone 2. That fight wasn't what I expected at all.
Yeah, you know, I thought for sure Dos Anjos could win this fight, and I'm pretty sure I picked him. I don't remember,
Yes,
but
we
my heart
both
was
picked
certainly with Cowboy. Cowboy just did not show up. When he has these big fights, he just seems not to show up. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Dos Anjos because he's one heck of a fighter we've seen the last few years. But what did you think?
It's not that he just doesn't show up when it's a big fight. He doesn't show up when he has a long layoff like he did. I think that's part of the problem. Like, less jet skiing and let's or water skiing and stuff and all bull riding, all that crazy stuff he likes to do. Do less of that, Donald, and concentrate on fights, buddy. I mean, well, every time he has these long layoffs, it seems that he never shows up mentally, and it seemed like that. You could see it in his eyes in the cage before the fight even started.
Yeah, it's weird. You know, he doesn't have long layoffs in like what you would think a long layoff for the average fighter, but for him it's a long layoff. You know, he was fighting 7 fights like so quickly together, and then he took 6 months off, I think it was, and that was enough for him to maybe fall off the horse, if that's what you're talking about, to use a cowboy analogy. But you know, Dos Anjos just took it to him, and man, Dos Anjos he's for real. We talk about fighters who are for real. You know, he beat Pettis, beat him really well, really fast. Not really fast, but just, you know, took it to him in every round, and now he just destroys Cowboy Cerrone, who was on a 7-8 fight win streak. And you know, where he goes from here, I guess it's McGregor, but nothing's been set in stone.
I don't think it's going to be McGregor. I don't think that fight is going to be put together. Number one, I think because at this point in time, I will say that Junior Dos Santos, Dos Anjos, Rafael Dos Anjos, I don't know why I said Junior, but that was the other guy, you know, that
he's
we saw. Yeah. Anyway, I just don't understand what they're thinking. If they put this fight together, I think that Rafael wins. He beats McGregor. I don't see that guy losing to anybody at 155 or let alone 145 coming up. He's just that good, man.
I agree. I mean, you talk about striking while the iron is hot and things of that nature, but if Conor does fight, you know, Dos Anjos, I agree. There's a good chance that he loses this fight. And you've got this star now who has, you know, done what he said in defeating all these guys, knocking out most of them, beating one of the pound per pound best in the division in Jose Aldo, and now you're putting him straight into the title. But that's what Dana White said, you know, and Conor's manager doesn't want him to fight at 145 anymore because of the weight cut. I understand that. I saw him with the weight cut. He looked horrible, but at least give him a couple of fights, you know, at 155 before he fights for the championship.
Oh, I think his next fight will be against Frankie Edgar, personally. I think McGregor's going to fight Frankie Edgar. He's going to give him that fight. And after he beats him, maybe I think he goes up then at that time. But here's the problem with that. Not only do I think that Rafael will beat McGregor at this time, the UFC has a lot to lose there. You know what I'm saying? They have their cash cow here. They had it with Ronda, and I think they still do to an extent, but let's just put it in perspective. In 2015, they set a record. They've got $600 million in revenue. They hit records with gate sales, pay-per-views. Let's face it, Ronda Rousey had a couple of fights this year. So did Conor McGregor. It was a huge year for the UFC. They've already lost one of their cash cows. Are they willing to lose their other cash cow at this time?
I don't know what percentage of that was both of them, but it's going to be pretty high.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
Huge with those two. As far as Conor McGregor goes, though, as far as Rafael goes, though, I don't think anybody beats him. So where he goes next, it doesn't matter. He beats anybody they put in front of him at 155.
It all depends on Nurmagomedov. Depends if he comes in and if he looks good and he can take the wrestling to him and win a decision. I don't think he beats him outright, But that's the only really thing I'm really thinking about. But Nurmagomedov is constantly getting hurt. And it all depends about that. And that's the only thing I see a problem with Dos Anjos.
Yeah, he ragdolled Dos Anjos when he fought him last time. And he made him look like a child at times. And that was impressive. But at the same time, I think we're seeing a different Dos Anjos nowadays. Mm-hmm. A very different Dos Anjos. Just like we're seeing a very different, Conor McGregor since, he first came into the UFC. He's grown. But you know what? Like I said, at this time, without a great opponent that I can foresee, I don't think he loses his belt anytime soon. I think he stays champ for a while.
Yeah, but he hasn't fought many wrestlers. He fought Benson Henderson, but Benson didn't really wrestle with him. And that was a quick fight. Dos Anjos. Look, when you win fights as quickly as Dos Anjos is winning, it's hard to put a knock on a guy. But with Nurmagomedov's wrestling, Conor certainly doesn't have any wrestling. I don't know about that. Conor's movement, there's a chance, but I am in pretty much agreement with you. I just got to see what Nurmagomedov can do, not because of what he did in his last fight in their last fight, but because his wrestling is so good. That's when we'll know. Just like with McGregor, we weren't sure what was going to happen with the wrestling. Chad took him down a couple of times, but guess what? McGregor still won that fight. So we're going to see now if Dos Anjos can win that fight against a wrestler.
Yeah, and it's another thing too with Dos Anjos. If he fought McGregor at least has that movement. I think that can pose a problem. But it's just that seeing how fast Dos Anjos has been lately and how he comes right in and just dominates his opponent, I don't know how McGregor would deal with that because we haven't seen anybody try that. Actually, I take that back. We just saw somebody try that, and he got knocked out in 13 seconds. I mean, but that's Jose Aldo. We're talking about a whole nother beast in Dos Anjos, and he's a bigger, stronger fighter. And this whole thing where I've been speculating, and I'll put it out there, I've been speculating that Dos Anjos has been on roids for quite some time, but that's all it is speculation. That's starting to dwindle because of all the new drug testing and stuff they're doing. I'm starting to think that this boy has just gotten better.
Yeah, because he's been to a different camp, which is good too. That's why I didn't say too much about steroid use and stuff like that. Although he's got a giant head, man, it's huge, which is one of those telltale signs.
Now, if it ever came out, Mike, I definitely wouldn't be shocked. But
no, I hear what you're saying.
But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to stop just throwing that out there on this poor guy because maybe he's just that good. And hey.
He's from the same camp as Fabricio Verdum, the heavyweight champ. So the moving to a different camp is what's done it. I think this is not the same guy who lost to Clay Guida 5 years ago or whatever.
Definitely not the same guy.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. Let's dive into the next fight. Of course, we had Alistair Overeem versus Junior Dos Santos. This fight, I didn't expect it at all either. I didn't expect Overeem to dominate Dos Santos and beat him the way he did. I wasn't looking for the KO from Overeem.
Yeah, I wasn't either. I picked different Dos now.
Yes.
Dos Santos. I picked Dos Santos
I
to
did
knock
too.
him out by, in the second round. And, the first round, they kind of took off for a while. They started landing some punches, and I gave over him the first round, if I'm remembering this fight correctly, because it was about a week
boring.
ago.
It was a really feeling out round. I mean,
Yeah.
and when we're talking about feeling out, this one was an extreme feeling out round in the first. Like I couldn't tell you who won that first round. It was so boring, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I just gave it to over him. It seemed like he landed maybe a few more punches or a few harder punches, but if it would have went to Dos Santos, I would have been fine with it. But then he Overeem found his range in round 2 and knocked him down and pretty much out. And Junior Dos Santos, that guy is no longer up there with with Kane and Verdum. I'm not sure if you consider him a gatekeeper to get to those guys, or if you put him as far down as just with the regular heavyweights that are names but aren't going to do much anymore. Jay, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I would have to put him down. His stock is definitely down, and Overeem's stock is up. It's actually up because of beating Dos Santos the way he did. But I will say though, again, and I know I'm beating a dead horse, guys, with every podcast when I bring up the heavyweight division. The heavyweight division is so lacking in good talent, in great talent, because they have good talent, but it's nothing like the other divisions. It's not exciting for me anymore. I just don't get excited for the heavyweights. I don't.
I think it's mostly because the guys are aging too. You've got names, but they're aging guys. The one guy I'll just throw out really quickly, but we'll talk about him later, is Stipe Miocic. He's the only guy that's really a guy who's a new guy, up and comer, less than 50, or he has 15 fights. So we'll see where he goes. But Jay, you're right. There's the division is not very good. It's stale. It's older names. Those name values go. You won't have much there.
Yeah, definitely not. So again, Overeem wins TKO, second round. And I'm not a big fan of Overeem, but you know what? My hat's off to him.
Yeah, I think it was mostly about Junior Dos Santos, taking too much punishment over his last few fights, and his chin is gone. Not that Overeem can't punch hard, because he knocks people out. He does. But look, Overeem has not looked great since he's been in the UFC. Now, maybe because he's at Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn's, maybe that's why he's looking better. But I think, I'm sorry to poo-poo Overeem just a little bit, but I think a lot of it has to do with JDS just not having the chin anymore.
Yeah. Mike, let's go on to the next fight. Let's talk about a great fight that night. Fight of the night for sure. Nate Diaz versus Michael Johnson. And I'm surprised we called this fight of the night because beforehand, when we did these picks, well, we know that Michael Johnson lacks that killer instinct to get the finishes anyway. But we both felt, I think, that he was going to win this fight. Nate Diaz has had a long layoff, and I wasn't expecting to see Nate Diaz in such good shape physically and with his game plan. And his fight game in the ring, in the cage, was just excellent. His boxing was superb.
Yeah, we both gave the edge to Johnson. But something I said in the podcast too was that Nate Diaz is going to he's going to pull it out of Johnson if Johnson's going to win this fight. Because that killer instinct is not there. Well, Nate Diaz pulled out. He didn't pull anything out of Johnson. I don't know if that's the correct way to say it. He pulled out a cowardness or something.
Yeah,
he just stymied him.
He pulled out his
soul.
soul.
That he started pointing and laughing at him.
Yeah, he pulled out his soul. He sucked Michael Johnson's soul out of his body and just basically made him embarrassed Michael Johnson, I would say.
Yeah, thanks for finishing my thought, because I couldn't get the right words out, but I knew
he
pulled something out.
I knew what you were talking about.
But yeah, it's just
I saw that.
It was crazy how he just and that's just how I thought that Johnson would lose. I still didn't think he was going to lose, but I thought if he was going to lose, that's what it was going to be. That Diaz was going to just do what the Diaz brothers do great, which is strike well and get in your head.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? We had 3 guys that night call out McGregor, and Nate Diaz was one of them, which was kind of funny. He's a 155er, a big 155er, I would have to add. And he's calling out McGregor, which I got to add, I think that would be a great fight. to be honest. I really do think that would be a great fight. It'd be a great fight. It would be a smart fight financially for the UFC, also for the fighters. Nate Diaz, he's thinking about money too. Yeah. That's a big bank account, for him. And McGregor, I think him and McGregor would have great back and forth dialogue. They could sell this fight, and it would be a great fight. In the end, I think that McGregor would probably beat him.
Yeah, but I agree. But what I would want to throw out is that's the perfect fight for me to have McGregor have his first fight at 155 instead of stepping up and fighting Dos Anjos right off the bat. I mean, that fight. You talk about money fights. I agree. I mean, can you imagine both these guys talking at each other, pointing and stuff like that? Oh,
well, we could imagine it, but it would be 10 times what we could actually imagine.
Yeah,
it would go way beyond what we can imagine.
Yeah, there's going to be middle fingers being thrown up. There's going to be pounding of chests.
And here's a thought: who would get into whose head? Because they both like to play head games.
I would think that, based off what I've seen, is that Conor will get in your head early if he can, but Nate, when he starts to land, and Nick, to be honest with you, both of them, they get into your head a little later.
Yeah.
Because the fight's going on, you haven't put them away. So it really just depends on how the fight goes in the beginning, in my opinion.
But two things, I want to bring up two things about this fight against Michael Johnson. Yes, Nate Diaz looked great, both physically and his fight game, but he was fighting a Michael Johnson that we've already said lacks that killer instinct. And, might I add, he also didn't try to take Nate Diaz down, which is kind of odd because Michael Johnson is a decent wrestler, and I didn't see any of that from him that night. He just tried to, box with him. And here's the thing, though. He doesn't have the movement of Conor McGregor, so I think Conor McGregor would definitely be able to get out of the way of some of those strikes by Diaz. I think it would be a great fight. I think they should put that together, honestly, on his first 155 fight. But first, give that fight to Frankie Edgar. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, to comment on what you just said about Michael Johnson not trying to take down Nate Diaz, there's two things at play here, I think. One is that Michael Johnson, he just wants to strike a lot more. He's falling in love with his hands, that type of thing. But also, Nate Diaz is so great off his back. He may have thought, if I take him down, do I really want to deal with that off his back? If he was a stronger wrestler, maybe a guy like a Matt Hughes caliber, a Chad Mendez caliber, that kind of thing, maybe he would have done that. But, Michael
Nate
Johnson
Diaz
seems to be a game plan guy, so he's going to stick with his game plan through and through. And, the game plan wasn't working. So, to me, if your game plan is not working, what's great about mixed martial arts is if you're not doing it on the feet, you can do it with wrestling. If you can't do it with wrestling, you can do it on the ground with submissions. And if he would have broken away from his game plan, maybe he would have had a better chance. But hey, Nate Diaz is back, man, and I'm happy to see him back and looking good. Too. And let's see how far he can go.
Yeah, definitely, me too. Okay, let's move on to the next fight. We had Charles Oliveira versus Miles Jury. And with this fight, Mike, it pretty much, I thought that Charles Oliveira would probably win this one, and he looked good doing it. So he beats Miles Jury in the first with a submission guillotine choke.
Yeah, Miles Jury is no joke, man. He's one of those guys that he's a good up and comer. He's ranked. But Oliveira just shows why he's been around for a while and why we still love watching him.
Yeah. And what's next for Charles, though? Where do you think he goes from here?
I mean, he's beaten a good guy in Jury, and he's a steadfast guy in the division. It's really up to how the UFC perceives and where they want to go. If they want to make him having to be another contender again, those top 5 guys, or they still want to build him up a little stronger for fans outside of Brazil. Even though most Americans and I'm sure most hardcores know Oliveira, it just depends on how they want to use him.
Yeah, well, and I know we skipped over a fight, but I just want to touch on it, Mike. Randa Marcos fought against Carolina. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name, but it just starts with a K. Let's just say that. She's from Poland, and she won decision unanimously against Randa. And she seems like an average fighter and at 115. And I'm looking forward to see her fight again. but I just wanted to touch on that real quick. Other than that, Mike, we had Nate Marquardt fighting CB Dollaway. And, of course, Marquardt finishing this with a KO in round 2. Did you see that coming?
I didn't see it coming. Look, Nate's a great fighter. He's kind of returning to form. But CB Dollaway, he's one of those guys who was really, it's tough to say CB Dollaway is an up-and-comer because he's been around for a while. Yeah, but he kind of moved on to that next level of, beating better guys as opposed to just losing to the good guys. And so this really puts a little crimp in CB Dollaway's, I don't want to say career because he's a young guy, but it stops him a little bit, even though Nate Marquardt is a fantastic fighter. Yeah,
it definitely does stop him a bit. I wasn't expecting Nate Marquardt to win this fight. I actually was thinking CB was going to take him just because Nate's been around for a while, and I thought, I thought it was going to go the other way. I thought CB was going to KO him because I thought that by now Marquardt's chin was done. But apparently the layoff and coming back and everything and fighting did him some good. So he wins second round by KO.
That's why it's tough to count some of these guys out, until they go on to like a 4-fight losing streak or something like that. The guys who have been at the top of the game, obviously, I'm talking about. I'm not talking about some guy who's fighting definitely. Like the Missouri Barn, at like Barn Busters 79 or something like that. I'm talking about like these big guys who have won championships, like in Strikeforce or the UFC, WEC, Pride, those guys.
So you're talking the Bob Sapps and Tank Abbotts and
exactly. Tank Abbott will still jump off a bar stool and whoop your behind and mine if I try and help you.
I ain't messing with Tank Abbott even today. All right, Mike, let's get into some news.
News Corner.
So what do you have in the way of news?
There's two pretty big things I have, and I know you have another one too coming up after. But the big thing right now is Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping at Fight Night 83 in London this February. I believe it's the 27th. Again, I'll say it again. Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping. And the interesting thing is it's on Fight Pass.
Yes.
So, get that $10 ready. Write that check, people. Send in that money because Fight Pass is here and it's not going away.
Well, I might have stated it on the podcast, and I don't know if I did a few weeks ago, but I did tell you, I know for sure, that I speculated that Fight Pass, that UFC was going to start putting bigger fights on Fight Pass because they want to sell Fight Pass. This is the only way I could see Fight Pass growing is they need to get this subscription based format. They need to get their subs up somehow, and they're not going to do it with just, prelims. They're not going to do it with that. They got to put the big fights on there. Not huge fights, but you know what? I think this one's a pretty huge fight considering it's a first time Silva has not been on a pay-per-view in a long time anyway. It's been a long time.
He's always been on a pay-per-view since being in the UFC, unless his first fight against Chris Lieben was not on a pay-per-view. It's possible that it was on a Spike card because he was new. But he beat Rich Franklin for the title the next fight, and that had to be on pay-per-view.
Yeah. And a lot of people are either up in arms over this, or some people are just biting the bullet and they're going to pay that $10 a month or the $99 a year, which is what I did. But here's the thing, though. They've got to do this to make this grow. Fight Pass isn't going to grow without doing stuff like this every now and again. And I say they should do this maybe once every couple of months. Throw on a good fight. Put a good fight on Fight Pass. You'll get people to come eventually. All those naysayers about Fight Pass will eventually come, or most of them will.
Yeah, and I re-upped or re-signed, I should say, with Fight Pass. I had signed up for the first couple months, and I didn't care about these guys in Brazil and Ireland and everywhere that are fighting who I don't know, and all they really showed me on a Fight Pass was maybe the main event was some top ranked guys. But now look. If you're going to have these guys fighting like, Silva and Bisping, and I agree. I mean, you like I wrote on the Facebook, man, go get your Apple TV and watch these fights on your big HD TV because if you're looking at it from how was looking at it originally, which is, look, the fight library is great, but I don't really need it. But the local fights are not that great. Well, now we're like Jay is saying, we're going to have more and more fights that are like this. Now, maybe it won't be like, former pound for pound leaders, but it's going to be fights we're going to want to see. And I think I wrote on Facebook too that, yeah, sure, you can find these fights online, but they're not going to be up for a while, and you don't want to get spoiled when it's, Bisping and Silva.
Definitely. And you don't just need Apple TV. You can also go out there and get a Roku
right.
And a lot of these these new game consoles even have Fight Pass, and it's crazy. So I suggest getting Fight Pass. There's a lot of great old fights on Fight Pass to watch. They always have new content there too, with Invicta and some other fights that they show from time to time. But you get a lot of prelims and stuff that you won't see anywhere else, and it's a good thing to have. If you like MMA, Fight Pass is a no-brainer.
And when we talk about UFC 195 coming up, there is a big fight that's going to be on the Fight Pass prelims. So
yep. So what else you got for us in the way of news, Mike?
Well, do you want to kind of give before I move on to my last one, do you want to give out just maybe our thoughts on who we think is going to win that fight, or do you want to just lay that? We don't have to delve in too big, but just kind of your initial thoughts.
I'll give my initial thought. I think that Silva wins that fight. I think he's faster than Bisping, and I think overall, I think this is going to be his, I won't say comeback fight in terms of he's making a comeback to get the title back or anything, but I think this is going to be a comeback fight in that he actually wins and wins well. I think he beats Bisping, knocks him out.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's going to knock him out or not. I think he wins his fight. When he fought, Nick Diaz back in January, he looked good in that fight. He won that decision. But, there was some little to-dos in that with him getting popped for PEDs. And so this is the first fight back from being popped from PEDs. So
that does kind of throw a wrench into it.
What's that?
That throws a wrench into it.
Yeah, and with this being a perennial top 10 guy, I think this will really show where he's at without PEDs. Well,
I take it back. I'm not saying knockout now. I'm saying Silva will win by decision.
Yeah, and it's a 5-round fight, so I'm leaning towards Silva with decision. The only thing I see with Bisping having a chance is that something that people talked about for a while, but I really didn't see until the last maybe like couple years, is that Bisping is a very good technical striker, and if he can land some really good blows, keep the momentum going, maybe he has a shot at overwhelming Silva. Because he won't knock him out; he doesn't knock people out. But if he gets Silva off his game, but Silva is Anderson Silva, man. He's lost to Chris Weidman, and that's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it
in the UFC. People.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I can't wait for the fight. Like I said, Fight Pass is great to have, and it's only getting better.
And, coming off of Fight Pass now, we have Sage Northcutt, Super Sage Northcutt. He is now going to be fighting at UFC on Fox 18 in January. I believe it's January 30th or 31st. That's UFC on Fox 18. So, yeah, we just had a UFC on Fox card, but now it's a new year. And he's fighting kind of a submission ace guy named Andrew Holbrook. Holbrook's, he's 11-0. 1-0 in the UFC. That fight was a split decision win over Ramsey Nijem. So that's a decent guy he beat, even though it's by split decision. He does have 9 subs and 1 TKO in those 10 fights before his fight in the UFC. So this guy's legit, Jay. And it's again the growth of Sage Northcutt here. We're going to see a guy that can grapple with him and what he can do about it.
Yeah, I just hope that he goes back to either TriStar or a better camp than just training with his dad and in a small time gym, wherever he lives. Because let's face it, we saw some issues with his game. He is progressing, but there were some issues there with his last fight where he didn't look so good off of his back. But I'm pumped to see him grow as a fighter because the kid's got a lot of strength and let's face it, he's got cardio for days. It seems. I can't wait to see him fight again. And when did you say that date was?
It's like January 30th or 31st. It's at the very end of the month, which is good, or of next month, which is great. Oh
wow, okay. So he just fought, so that's great. I guess he wasn't hurt at all, obviously.
Yeah, he demolished Pfister. The only thing he had a problem with was, once he was taken down.
Yeah, that's the problem I had with him. But other than that, it's almost like it was just bad game plan. It was just a bad training camp or something, because it was like he had the cardio, he had the tools to get it done. It's just that he didn't piece the puzzles together to get it done efficiently. Kind of took him some time, and that's where I think a good camp comes in.
Oh, I agree. And if you're going to excel in this sport, you've got to have a good camp. Once you get into the UFC, you've really got to have a good camp. Unless you're like Conor McGregor. And what I mean by that is not that he doesn't have a good camp, but he trains with the same people. I don't even remember what his camp's called. But but he's been fighting for a little bit now. And by the way, it's going to be the 30th is what Northcutt is fighting Holbrook. That's the Johnson Bader card, which will be great. Just kind of finish it off. We're going to see how Northcutt does against a guy who's a submission ace. If he's below a submission ace, watch out.
Well, and I know his last fight was on Fight Pass, and he loved fighting on Fight Pass.
Yes, he does,
Mr. Dana. But hey, he's going to be in front of the world on Fox, and I think this is going to be his showcase fight. So I think this is going to be good for him and for the UFC as well, of course, because I think he's very marketable. And we're going to see that on the 30th, I guess. So, Mike, in other news, if you're all done with the news that you have, I just wanted to say that Fight Night 82 has been bitten by the injury bug. Let's just say that Mr. Smiling Sam Alvey is going to have a hard time smiling that night, because apparently he got his jaw broken. And it happened during a training. And somebody kicked him in the face and broke his jaw. So, again, it's one of those things where we talk about how hard do these guys have to train before a fight? How hard should their sparring be? It's crazy that we're constantly getting these injuries, and I don't know what to do here about this stuff. Like what they should be doing and not doing. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the things is there's no hard sparring the week of the fight. There's some guys who don't even spar very hard, and then you've got guys like Vanderlei Silva and Shogun and those guys back in the day that would just spar 100%, or basically have mini fights in the gym. I don't know what to say on how they should do it. But a
kick to the face, that's pretty brutal.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't understand that. I wonder if he wasn't looking for it, or because when you're sparring, a lot of times, you're going to want to try and fake somebody out, just make sure they're on their game. But a kick so hard that it breaks your jaw.
That's pretty bad.
And Alvey, he's a fan favorite. He's one of those guys that you want to watch him win. You want to watch him fight. It's a detriment to the card now that he's off of it. So,
yeah, he's definitely a favorite around these parts too. Him doing the podcast and allowing us to interview him here was a great pleasure and honor. And I'd love to talk to him again sometime, but we'll wait till that jaw heals before we give him a call up and try to set that up.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's all the news that I have as well, Mike. And so let's go ahead and move on to the next card that's coming up this weekend. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, UFC 195, January 2nd. So, it's the card, it could be better. But what really saves this card, in my opinion, is the fantastic, one of the best ever main events. And I don't say that lightly, because you've got Robbie Lawler, the rejuvenated, amazing Robbie Lawler, who's been tearing through guys, with the exception of Johnny Hendricks, losing to Johnny Hendricks once. But, really put it to him in his second fight against Carlos Condit. Carlos Condit, another guy, well-rounded, the natural-born killer. If you want fighters that fans love and fighters that other fighters love to watch, this is your fight. This is your bout. And, there's two other fights I think maybe we should talk about. One's the co-main event, Andrei Arlovski versus Stipe Miocic. And that's for sure got title implications. There's two or three other heavyweight fights that have happened or are going to happen to really choose who the next contender is. And so we'll be looking at that. And the featured prelim on 195 is Michael McDonald. He's returning after 2 years. He's had some hand injuries, wrist injuries. He's all mended up, and he's ready to go.
Yeah. You know what? I wanted to also touch on Poirier and Duffy as well.
Oh yeah, Fight Pass prelim actually.
Let's start at the bottom because I know we're going to want to talk a lot about Lawler Condit.
We pick 'em.
So let's go ahead and start with Poirier and Duffy. Of course, Joe Duffy being the only guy in the UFC to have beaten Conor McGregor. He's in the UFC doing his thing. He's 14-1, Mike. He's looking good, solid fighter against Dustin Poirier, who McGregor beat. And he's 18-4. For a while there, he was on the come up big time and looking like he was a big contender. But Poirier has been pushed back, of course, getting beat a couple of times and not looking good against McGregor. But who does when it comes to McGregor's left hand anyway? I mean, they all get knocked out by that left. Who do you think wins this one, Mike?
I'm going with Duffy. I still think Poirier is one heck of a fighter. But I'm going with Duffy because he's really got the hot hand. He's really the guy who's knocking people out. He's submitting people. He looks like the guy who is not the next Conor McGregor, but he's that next up and coming stud. And I have a problem with this fight though. It's not that who's fighting. It's that it's on a Fight Pass prelim. Now originally they were supposed to fight in Ireland as the main event on a Fight Pass. Granted, I get it. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But now they're a Fight Pass prelim on a UFC pay-per-view card. These guys easily could be main events. Sorry, not main events. They could easily be main card.
Yes.
And what they should be, in my opinion, is and I love Michael McDonald to death, but this should be your featured prelim, not on the Fight Pass.
No. I would even put them over Brandao and Ortega or Larkin, Tumanov. I would put them over those guys on the main card. It doesn't make sense to me, but at the same time, it does. I think they're trying to sell Fight Pass. This is another one of those fights where people are interested. Not as huge as Silva, but you got a couple of good, decent fighters here.
We're hardcores, yeah.
And you know what? Everybody kind of wants to see where Duffy's at in his game. And we've been watching him, and he's been growing within the UFC. And like you said, I think he's going to beat Dustin Poirier. I think he's the better fighter, and I think he's going to show that. So I am going with Joe Duffy as well. I think he wins by TKO, in probably the end of second, maybe third, beginning of third.
Yeah, picking a fight, I really just thought about who's going to win. I didn't think about how and when. I think that's a good. I think, your observations are good on that. I think Duffy, really, I'll go with finish, but it depends on, what kind of finish it is, because he's just so stellar at both subs and striking. Yeah. What was your pick again? It was a third round knockout?
TKO, probably the end of the second, maybe beginning of the third.
Okay. I'm going to go with a submission in the third round, early in the third round.
Sounds good.
I think I'm going to look at it as it's going to be kind of a war in the first two rounds. Yeah. In the beginning of the third, I think it's when Duffy pulls ahead. And
I'm not hating on Dustin. I like Poirier. He's a great fighter. Matter of fact, he was one of the fighters that he had his own documentary or something. There was a documentary about him a few years back.
Yeah.
And
is that Fightland?
I think it might have been Fightland, but it was a good documentary, and it was fun to see him on that. And I was interested in seeing him grow in the UFC. Still am, but I just think Joe Duffy is going to edge him out here. And what fight do you want to talk about next, Mike? Of course.
Well, if we're going up the card, we talked about some of the guys who are fighting on it, but we're not talking about them because they're just not great. I don't want to say they're not great fighters. That's disingenuous, but they're just not worth the time for our hour to talk about. So let's just the Michael McDonald prelim, the feature prelim versus Masahiro Kanehara. And, this is really Michael McDonald's fight to lose. This is a showcase fight for him. Yep. It's against a tough veteran. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that he can't walk all over him or shouldn't or whatever you want to say, but this is Michael McDonald.
I'm saying that McDonald should walk all over Kanehara. He's 25-12. I just don't see this guy beating McDonald. If he does, I'll be shocked.
Well, I'm picking McDonald in the second round by submission. I certainly think he's going to finish him.
I will say it's in the first.
First round, yeah?
First round. He's going to first round sub him in the first round. Kanehara has nothing for Michael McDonald. I hate to be that way, but I don't see him winning.
No. So sometimes I'm going to come at it from a, just talking about the show, kind of keep it as nice to some of the fighters as possible. And sometimes you're going to come out and say what I'm thinking as well, which is what you said. And sometimes I do the way you do it, and stuff like that. So, we're the yin and the yang right now. But yeah, man, I'm picking.
I'm glad to see
McDonald by second.
Yeah, I'm glad to see McDonald back. By the way, I can't wait to see him. So.
Yeah. Then after that, we've got on the main card the. Co-main event, Andrei Arlovsky, who's still on a tear, and he's fighting Stipe Miocic. But I think this is where Andrei Arlovsky is going to falter. I think this is where he gets in the back of the line for a title shot. Miocic is 13-2. He lost to Struve early in his UFC career, but other than that, he's only lost to Junior Dos Santos. Back when Junior Dos Santos, what was the man? But, in those 7 wins out of the 9 in the UFC, he's got 4 TKOs and 3 decisions. So Miocic is a good dude. He's a great striker, great movement. He's the new breed of heavyweight. I think that's enough to get over on an older Arlovsky.
Yeah, but I just have to say again, this heavyweight division is not very good. And if you look at his last few fights, yes, he beat Antonio Silva, KO'd him, but it's Antonio Silva.
Talking about Arlovsky?
Yeah, it's Antonio Silva. And then he beat Travis Brown. During that whole time, Travis had that issue with his, ex-old lady.
Don't forget Frank Mir, man. I think Frank Mir was.
And then Frank Mir was his last fight.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're going up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Frank Mir was his last fight. And we know what a dog that fight was. It was just downright terrible. Probably the worst heavyweight fight I've seen in a while. It was just so bad. But so when you say he's on a tear, I understand what you're saying. He's been winning, but he hasn't been winning well.
I'm just talking about
or against great
I'm not
opponents.
Talking about
but that's the thing. We don't have great opponents except for maybe somebody like Miocic. Yeah, this guy is a great fighter. I think he's one of the bright spots in the heavyweight division. And like you said earlier, it's because he's a young kind of upcoming guy. I say he's going to beat Andrei Arlovsky. I think that, like you said, this is where it ends for Andrei and where it begins for Miocic. I think that he's going to take this one and KO him.
What round?
I'll go second.
Yeah, I'm thinking, it could be first or second. I'm going to go with you on the second round. I wanted to say third originally, but Arlovsky, even though he's been looking good with his chin lately, Miocic, he's got so much power. He's younger. His movement, he doesn't have the Conor McGregor movement, the way we talk about movement nowadays. But for this big heavyweight division, the guy is so light. He's so the movement I think is what Arlovsky had when he was younger. And now it's what Miocic has. And he is really the lone bright spot in the young up-and-comer guys. I mean, you've got guys like Barnett that are still solid. A guy like Rothwell who's
but they've been
good.
around.
He's knocking people out. But I was going to say is that they've been around. So you really just have Miocic coming up, and they're going to push him hard, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Of course, tell us who we have next. Who is the main event here?
Well, yeah, like I said in the beginning, man, this is a great fight. This is a fighter's fight and a fan fight. It's Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit, and I cannot tell you how excited I am for this fight. I'm going to be in Vegas for this fight. Jay, I'm going to put a little bit of money down. I'm not going to tell you how much it is in case I win, whether I win or lose. I'll tell you, based on if I win. And I'm picking Condit here. My money is going on Condit, and I'll tell you why. Because he's more well-rounded. And he's great off his back. He's got heavy hands. He's not known as a wrestler, but he's not afraid to take you down. And I think that's all he needs to beat Robbie Lawler. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm certainly not saying that Robbie Lawler can't win this fight because the new Robbie Lawler is a beast.
Yep.
But I think this is, man, this is Condit's time, man. He's paid his dues. He's a smart fighter. He trains at Winklejohn and Greg Jackson. And before I get into too much more minutia,
Coaches
I'll just
of the
say
year.
what's that?
Coaches of the year, by the way.
Yeah, is that through MMA Junkie,
Yes.
UFC?
Yes.
Junkie,
MMA
yeah.
Junkie, yeah.
Yeah, so that's who I'm picking right now, and we can get into a little more minutia, Jay. But let me, of course, have your say before I get farther.
You know what, Robbie Lawler, I agree with everything you said here about Carlos Condit. By the way, he is much more versatile than Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler is a beast, but Robbie Lawler throws caution to the wind, where I think that's going to be his downfall against Condit in this fight. Condit is a much smarter fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he's going to take advantage of that in this fight. I think that Condit, it may go to the distance, but I think it's going to go Condit's way. I'm going to go with a decision win for Carlos Condit.
Are you thinking Condit Diaz? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Similar to that, I mean?
Similar to that
exactly.
in terms of fighting smart. And I don't see Lawler as anything else but a brawler. And
yeah.
I'm not saying Condit can't get caught by Lawler, and if he does, it could be lights out for him. But I think Condit's smarter than that. I think Condit's going to win this. He's going to pull it off, and he's going to be your next champ, people.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what's great about this fight is both these guys have rock solid chins. They both can throw leather and they can both take it.
Yes.
And if anything, if you can see anything that happened in Lawler's last fight, against Rory McDonald.
Oh,
the third round, Rory almost finished that fight if there's 10 seconds later. But even so, we don't know that.
Yeah.
But McDonald, so Lawler can take a punch and he can give it out. Other things it comes down to is Robbie Lawler has but he's gotten better at takedown defense. Both his fights with Johnny Hendricks, accomplished wrestler, one of the best in the division. He's taken down a couple of times, but especially in his last fight, he wasn't taken down as much. So if you look at Condit, he's not a wrestler per se, so he may not try that. But I agree with everything that I'm saying, everything you're saying. I think it just comes down to a Condit victory. But the numbers say different, though, Jay. Last time I checked, Condit is a plus 115. He's the underdog.
Wow. Yeah, to me, that's kind of crazy. But at the same time, I understand people are respecting the champion. What he did to Rory McDonald was crazy. Like, I wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah.
Rory kind of fought his fight too. He kind of just got in there and brawled with him most of the time, which was odd for Rory.
Yeah, I agree.
But Condit, he's not that type of fighter. Condit, he's got that killer instinct, yet he waits to strike with that killer instinct. He doesn't just go in there guns a-blazing. He takes it, he picks his shots, and he picks it well. And let's say Lawler takes him to the ground. You got a scary man off of his back in Carlos Condit.
Yeah, and if I am Robbie Lawler, I don't spend too much time on there. Maybe on top of him. Maybe I kind of get position, land a couple of punches, just so I make sure I get the points for that
and get up,
and then stand back up.
Yes.
But you were talking about the guys that Lawler has beaten, since coming back. Names Josh Koscheck, Jake Ellenberger, Matt Brown. I thought he lost the Johnny Hendricks fight in the second fight. I'm not going to be too angry about it because it was a close fight, but it was still against a great fighter, so that was a split decision win for him. And he avenged his loss against Rory McDonald, and which is probably the best fight of the year, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, this fight, it's just it can't suck. It can't not be good.
Yeah, I mean, and then looking on the other side of things, Carlos Condit, his last win was against Thiago Alves. It's no big shock that he was going to beat him by TKO, but his last loss was to Tyron Woodley, which, of course, that knee injury happened. We never really will know how that would have played out. Tyron was getting the best of him, so we can only assume that it could have been a TKO there. But, it was due to a knee injury pretty much when it happened. And then a win by over Martin Kampmann. And his last two losses before that was Johnny Hendricks and George St. Pierre.
Yeah.
I mean,
the two previous champs.
Come on. And then, of course, beating Nick Diaz, Dong Hyun Kim, Dan Hardy, Rory McDonald. He's fought some great fighters as well. Like I said, the edge I have to give to Carlos Condit just because I think he's a smarter fighter, and he's going to pull this off with a decision.
And make no mistake, even though Woodley was getting the better of him, and he was, the injury was not an injury that Tyron gave Condit. It was just one of those freak things.
Yeah.
So it's not like, he checked a kick or something like that. No, he just tweaked it, I think, on the takedown. It was just one of those weird things, like when you're walking through your house to go get a sandwich and you step wrong and suddenly your foot hurts. It's one of those things. So
exactly. And I just don't see this fight going Lawler's way unless he catches him with a lucky punch. That's the only way I see Lawler winning this fight, is catching him with a punch.
Yeah, catching with a punch maybe hurts him and then goes in for the kill. That certainly could be it.
But that's the only way I see this fight going Lawler's way. So put that money down, Mike, and I hope you win.
Oh yeah, I got some money for Christmas from my folks. Love my folks, and I'm gonna, this money that I didn't have before, and I haven't bet yet on fights. I'll be in Vegas. It's like I have to do it.
Yeah, might as well.
It's not Fight Pass. Sorry, Fighter of the Year, Jay. You want to move on to that, or you got any more things to talk about?
No. We've talked enough about that fight because I just can't wait for it. But let's go on to Fighter of the Month, Mike. Fighter of the Month. Just go ahead and say who is the Fighter of the Month. Fighter of the Year. Excuse me. This isn't Fighter of the Month. This is Fighter of the Year.
Yeah, it may not happen like this every year, but it certainly happened this year. Fighter of the Month is Conor McGregor. Fighter of the Year is Conor McGregor. And
definitely.
Yeah, Jay, I know you agree. And my question is, if you don't pick Conor McGregor, why? Because it's pretty open shut.
Yeah, how can you not pick Conor McGregor? Even as a hater of Conor McGregor, if you don't pick Conor, you're just being a hater. You're just in denial. The guy has had a couple of fights this year that have been fantastic. And you know what? His last win over Aldo in 13 seconds was so impressive. And just like Chuck Liddell says, the loudmouth can keep, running his mouth. As long as he keeps finishing fights, it's good with him. And
and Tito Ortiz is not that guy, and that's what Chuck's talking about, I think.
That's funny. But I read something about that, and I just thought it was funny. Chuck Liddell said, he's fine with him running his mouth as long as he finishes fights.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what most of us think. I think that's what we find endearing about Conor McGregor, is that he's now saying, look, I think a lot of us started with, this guy's good, but we'll see. This guy's good. He's certainly talking a lot.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's all backed up, and,
it's all backed up. And this last fight that he had was the biggest backup he's ever done. That was insane. But of course he's going to be Fighter of the Year. What's funny is Conor McGregor, I believe he's 14-2, Mike. Is that what his record is?
I think it was 14-2 before this last fight, so he may be 15-2. I know he's got the 2 losses.
Let me look it up real quick. I think that he is. Oh no, he's 19-2. Excuse me.
We're way off then. Okay,
way off. But he's 19-2, and the guy's he hasn't lost since like 2013.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, no, 2010. 2010.
Was that the Duffy loss, or
was the Duffy loss? Duffy. That was the last time he lost. So you're looking at a much different fighter than the last time he fought Joseph Duffy, because that was 5 years ago. Geez. Yeah, he's beat everybody they've put in his way, and he's finished a lot of guys. The last fight he didn't finish was against Max Holloway.
Yeah, he tore his ACL in the middle of that fight too. Yeah,
it was a decision against Max, and we're talking about a Max Holloway that was on the come up at that time as well. We've been eyeballing him through that fight and until today. That guy is a beast as well. So to get a decision win over Max Holloway with a torn ACL is crazy. And
Holloway, another guy calling out McGregor,
Yeah, all these guys calling out McGregor, and rightfully so. I mean, he's the big money fight.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, he beat Chad Mendes this year, and Jose Aldo, and Dennis Seaver all this year.
The asterisk I would put for Mendes is it was short notice, 2 weeks. However, even so, I've not seen a fighter like Conor McGregor since watching this sport. You see guys, I kind of wrote about this when he beat, on the Facebook page, when he beat when he beat Jose Aldo. But these guys, they come. You see a guy say, "Okay, this has changed the sport." You saw what George St. Pierre really was kind of the last guy. Or well, maybe I'll say that maybe it was Machida with his karate skills and the striking. But that Machida era didn't last very long. So before that, it was George St. Pierre. He really put it all together. Conor McGregor, though, with his movement, his striking, his talking and backing it up, this guy's special, man. He's fighter. He's fighter of the year. He's fighter of the month. He's fighter of the year. We'll see at the end of maybe 5 years, where he is. It's going to be interesting.
And I'd also like to add that he is fighter of the month for the second time for me this year, because our very first show, which was July 12th of this year, he fought that night against Chad Mendes, of course, and he was my fighter of the month.
Yeah, and I picked Chad Mendes. Yeah, I got you.
So, you know what? It's come full circle. Now it's the end of the year, and he's our fighter of the year. I can't wait to see 2016, what he has in store for us, because I know it's going to be a lot of talking and a lot of backing up that talk.
And please, Connor, don't fall into the trap of only fighting twice a year like a lot of champs do. It's not fair to the fans. It's fair to you. You make your money if you want to make your money. I completely understand that. But I hate people like Aldo, some other fighters that only fight a couple times a year, and it's just, I want to see these guys fight more,
Yeah, I want to see that too. He fought 3 times this year, and he did very well all 3 times.
Yep.
So he's the fighter of the year.
Yeah.
Mike, that's pretty much the end of this episode. If you've got anything to add, go ahead and add it now before we sign off.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing I really have to add, other than this first year of our podcast, I've had a lot of fun, brother. Glad we're doing it.
Me too.
We've talked to some really good fighters, some really cool guys. And really we're going to talk again in the new year, not after UFC 195, but we're going to talk after the Dillashaw Cruz Fox Sports 1 show on the 17th. That's a really big fight, man. I can't wait for it. It's TJ Dillashaw versus Dominic Cruz, for the bantamweight title. Dominic Cruz never lost his title, just been out for a while. You got Eddie Alvarez versus Anthony Pettis. That'll be a bang-up fight. Travis Brown versus Matt Mitrione. That's the other kind of big one on the main card. And, prelim card, Ross Pearson versus Francisco Trinaldo is a pretty good fight. But yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's a Sunday, guys, if you don't know. It's actually a Sunday fight, so it probably had something to do with football and probably with the playoffs being on Saturday and Sunday. So that is a Sunday, January 17th, and we'll talk about that. That'll be our next podcast.
Yeah, it sounds good, Mike. And yes, it's been great working with you this year. It's only been 6 months, so we haven't gone a full year yet, but I don't know. It's been a great ride so far, and I'm glad that the night I decided to start this podcast, I was doing another podcast at the time, and I called you up and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing an MMA podcast. What do you say? I'm not doing it without you." And you jumped on board, of course, and it's been fantastic. So I'm glad at the response that we're getting, both on iTunes and also through YouTube and the Facebook site. It's been very good. So if you guys haven't been to the Facebook site, I urge you to go there. Mike's always putting up good articles he writes about the fights and fighters and everything going on, mixed martial arts. And that, of course, would be at MMA Think Tank on Facebook, MMA Think Tank Podcast. And you can also find us on YouTube at the same name. And you can email us at mmathinktank@gmail.com, as well as phone in, tell us what you think about the show or any thoughts you might have at 925-237-1296.
And Twitter as well, right?
Twitter as well, MMA Think Tank PC. That's MMA Think Tank, P as in Paul and C as in cat. Anyway, Mike.
I was going to say, just take a look at the Facebook site today. I just put something up, kind of something I think is just kind of fun for all of us to, put ourselves in the shoes of either fighters or managers and that kind of thing. And what I basically put up was, you've got 3 big fighters in the UFC: Benson Henderson, Aljamain Sterling, Alistair Overeem. All want to be free. They're all free agents right now.
Yep.
If you had to let one of them go, who would you let go? And let us know on the Facebook.
Yeah, definitely. He's always posing questions like that and putting it out there. Some fun things to do. So check it out at Facebook, MMA Think Tank Podcast. And before I let you guys go, I just want to wish you guys all a great new year. We will catch you on the other side of this year. And Mike, any last words?
Yeah, January 2nd, UFC 195, I will be 40 years old and hopefully a lot richer. And yeah, man, we'll talk again, obviously in text like we normally do, and we'll chat again after Dillashaw and Cruz.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk at you next year.
Sounds good.